Welcome! I'm Eunis WildFire Christensen, and we focus on being true to our body into our 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond so that we can be healthy all our days. Today, we are going to talk about some of the food choices that contribute to health and long life. I'm Eunis WildFire Christensen, and I basically have been eating this way for the last 40 years, and it has been wonderful for me. One can stray, one can be involved in caregiving or something like that, so even in those times, it's all the more important to pay attention to what you eat. I would think that point number one is that you're going to want to make sure that you shop on the outside aisles of the grocery store. But we'll look at a little bit of these foods. They're just sample items, and then we'll also talk about the nutrition label that you find on any packaged food. That nutrition label is required to be put there by the Food and Drug Administration. It's called the FDA, okay? So the first thing, you want to have a variety of apples, oranges, different kinds of fruits, grapes, darker fruits. You want to maybe make sure you include yams in your diet. So some are smaller, some are larger. If they're a good substitute for potatoes, they act better in the body. In your food, keep it whole grain, sprouted whole grain if possible. It depends on the store that you shop in. Onions, I like to keep onions in almost everything. Onions have wonderful qualities for, in a sense, cancer prevention, so keep your onions in there. Also garlic. If you go a little bit further in, or you're in the dairy aisle, one thing I really like is non-fat Greek yogurt, no sugar, okay? And you'll see that they have a label here, so non-fat, no sugar. If you see it with fruit, they've generally also added more sugar, which we want to stay away from, okay? I also like what's called probiotics. It helps with your digestion. I put that in a smoothie in the morning. Sometimes I'll also include a little bit sprouted up greens, or they grind them up, broccoli, different kinds of kale. So I get enough greens. If I'm not eating enough of that, these are good in a smoothie as well for a quick breakfast. I like to use unsweetened soy milk. You come in at 70 calories per 8 ounces, which is very good, and it's very low on what's called the glycemic index. So this is just a sample of the types of foods in this wonderful book by a man named Dan Buettner called The Blue Zones. He researched the 5 longest lived populations on the planet. One thing they all had in common was that they ate plenty of legumes, which are beans and lentils and such, a lot of whole grains, and vegetables. So if you say, well, what's my common denominator for long life? Good plant foods, all right? And I tend to buy my salad greens all in, this is called a clamshell. That way I don't have a lot of stuff if it's one person, so that you have waste, so I buy them that way. But when you're in the middle of the aisle and you say, well, I don't know how to read these labels. This is a sample of the nutrition label that's required by the federal government. The first thing you want to look at is, well, what's the serving size? Is it 1 cup? Is it a 1/4 cup? Because that's going to determine how much of this is all of it. If it's a 1/4 cup and you really eat a whole cup of something generally, then you need to multiply these numbers you see here by 4 times, okay? So that's the first thing you look at, is what is the serving size? Then, how many servings per container? Well, do you normally eat the whole container? So double these numbers. Then you read calories. If you're trying to lose weight, if you're a female, try not to go under 1,200 calories a day unless you're like 4'10", then you could drop down to 1,000. But for dieting purposes, the guideline is don't go under 1,200. Well, then you start adding, well, what am I eating during the day so that I don't exceed that 1,200? For example, an apple about this size has got about 50 calories in it. So you just add up a whole bunch of broccoli. You can eat a lot of broccoli and not get over 100 calories. So you look at your calories, and then you look what makes up the calories. The total fat, that's important. This has 13 grams of fat. You want to watch your saturated fat, that it's not too high. As you come down, the cholesterol is important, but not as important as the sodium. To keep the blood pressure manageable, you want to keep your sodium down. Don't be sprinkling salt all over everything, but then you also want to keep the sodium. Guidelines are 2,000 milligrams a day. I like to keep it under 1,500, all right? Then you look at, well, what are the carbohydrates? If you tend to be wanting to eat a little bit lower carb diet, you watch that number right there. And then your protein. Coming back up to carbohydrates, you want to choose foods, if at all possible, that have a good amount of fiber. Fiber helps the food go through the body, and it also, if it depends if it's soluble or insoluble, has some good effects on cholesterol as well. Serving size, calories, fat, carbohydrates, and protein, those are your main things you want to look at first. For example, this is some broth for some soup if you don't have time, vegetable broth. It says low sodium, because sodium, especially in soup cans or something, they might have a quarter cup and it has like 500 milligrams of sodium in a quarter cup. And what if you eat a whole cup? That's 2,000 right there in a day. So we watch that, and if you want to do a quick calculation of how many calories are in a gram of fat or carbohydrates, right here it'll explain that in a gram of fat there's 9 calories, in a gram of carbohydrate or protein there's 4 calories. The fat has twice as much contribution to weight gain as your protein or your carbohydrates. Now we need fat. It helps keeps us healthy, it helps keeps us full, but we just have to monitor how much we eat. So hopefully this provides a good quick summary for you of how to navigate your way through the grocery store. And if you want to comment on this video, or if you also want to add your suggestions on what you find helpful for your diet, please go to TrueToMyBody.com and comment on my blog. There will be opportunities there so that you can share your thinking and what works for you. All right? Thank you very much, and bon appetit. And remember that being true to our body opens the door for life. I wish you well.